Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Education Livestream series presented by the Asian Community Development Council, ACDC. Every week, we're bringing you topics that are pertinent to the Asian American Pacific Islander community here in Nevada and beyond. And today, we have some special guests from Las Vegas Metro Police Department who are going to be coming up and talk to us about public safety, especially in light of violence incidents happening across the country, including right here in Nevada, especially when it comes to Asian American community. We've seen a lot of stories in the news, and we want to talk about that and ways for us to protect ourselves, our community, and with the help of local law enforcement as well. So I'm happy to have Sergeant Malcolm Napier and Officer Brad Strobehn. They're both with the community policing team with Metro, and you both are with the Spring Valley Area Command. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today, both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you. And it's good to see, this kind of communication and collaboration between different nonprofits, community groups, and local law enforcement. I know you guys have been very active, but with COVID, of course, with the past year, it's just been tough to kind of have that community meeting, right? Get together and having people out there. So, we've been doing a lot of Zoom events, and which including this one as well. But I know things are changing. So we're going to talk about that a little bit with more people getting out there in the community and being the face of that community and helping be that connection between, especially the Asian American community and local law enforcement. But first, I want you to talk a little bit about this. We've seen a lot of incidents happening out there, especially targeting Asian American, a lot of things being, talked about anti-Asian, hate crimes, discrimination, racism. And I would imagine this is a conversation that's happening over at Metro as well, and how you're going to combat this. So I'll start with you, Sergeant Napier. Talk to us about how, things have been, what are the conversations you're having, especially with that, just in the last few months?
Well, I'd just like to say, we started this conversation actually quite a while ago, maybe around 3-4 months ago. We were aware of media reports related to some events taking place in San Francisco or New York City, where incidents were reported which were based on perceived to be based on Asian crime victims.
Right.
And we have a fantastic dialogue and relationship with some of our stakeholders in the Spring Mountain Corridor and other areas throughout the Spring Valley Area Command from a wide variety of groups. And they actually brought these incidents to our attention and proactively sought data from us, asking if we'd seen the same information here. And we researched the data, and fortunately here in Las Vegas, we've not seen a spike or an increase in those kind of events here in town. But we have a great relationship. COVID certainly impacted some of the face-to-face stuff, just exactly as you said. But we have a great relationship with several community groups and stakeholders in our area. And we have text messages backwards and forwards, emails coming directly to us, both to the officers on the team and some of our leadership and executive staff. And we're proactive about things, not reactive.
Yeah, and maybe Officer Strobehn, you can talk a little bit about this, because pre-COVID, you do have a program where you have ambassadors out there, right? Civilian people who are going out in community. I think people probably seen them in yellow shirts, and that's a big part of building that connection and trust, especially with the Asian American community.
Yeah, that's one thing that we do have a great relationship with our Metro volunteers, and normally you'll see them wearing a yellow shirt, and we've had them along our Spring Mountain Corridor, mainly where we have a lot of our businesses. And they go in and they're able to kind of represent ourselves, since we can't be there every single minute. They go in there and they make contact with the business owners, and then we can talk to them and see how the relationships are going. Same as when we get that opportunity to kind of go in between different business hours, because we're working 24/7, and we understand that some businesses are closed when we're working. But that's nice that we have that contact, whether it's our volunteers or the actual community-oriented policing team that's making contact with them.
And you said, with COVID now kind of easing people, more people getting vaccinated, you're kind of relaunching that brand ambassador program once again, right, in the near future?
Yeah, we did. So we had them there, and they'd be making their rounds to be able to walk up and down Spring Mountain. And so now that we're kind of allowing people to kind of come back and do some more volunteering, that we'll be able to have them back on the street in Spring Mountain, kind of making their rounds and talking to those business owners again.
That's great. And, I was a reporter before, and, we've done stories on that connection and that building the trust. Maybe I'll have Sergeant Napier talk about this a little bit. We've seen, and as you said, fortunately for the Las Vegas community, Southern Nevada, we haven't seen as many of these violent incidents that we've seen. Maybe the latest one, that Asian American woman who was beaten right in broad daylight in New York City, just walking to church, I think for people living everywhere, even though we haven't seen those incidents, knock on wood, here in Las Vegas, we know it could happen anywhere, right? So, what's your kind of take on that, and what advice do you have in terms of people see something like that happening on our streets, and what should people do? Because the big issue we saw with that was that people didn't do anything, and it actually closed the door on that woman, an eyewitness who saw that. So, kind of, what's your take on that, coming from local law enforcement, and what people should do when they see things like that?
Well, I think certainly, speaking from a local perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I think your average citizen has a good moral compass and knows what's right. And obviously, from the police perspective, we get stuck in the middle where we don't want anyone to place themselves in danger, but at the same time, that we want citizens to know that obviously some of the conduct which is taking place in other cities is unacceptable, and it won't be tolerated here, not by the community and not by the police department either. And we'd encourage any citizen, if you're a victim of a perceived hate crime, try and disengage. Think of your safety first. You can always make a report afterwards. Try and go to a public area where there's plenty of witnesses. We all know in this modern age, everybody has a cell phone. I guarantee a cell phone is going to be coming out and someone's going to start filming things if you make enough of a scene. But do you can just to not be the quiet individual victim, in a dark alley where there's no witnesses, because simply having plenty of people around will deter some of these criminals who do engage in this kind of conduct. It's only by confronting them about aggressive or negative behavior that this kind of conduct is going to stop nationwide. I can certainly think just one example here in Las Vegas. We did have an incident back in January where a person was a victim of a sexual attack, and that person was a member of the Asian community. And I can't talk too much about it just out of respect for that person's privacy.
Right.
I don't think there's any material which would suggest that person was targeted simply because of the race. It was more of just an opportunity, and that unfortunately wrong place, wrong time. But the fantastic thing about it was 3 citizens saw it take place, actually stepped up, intervened, and actually got the suspect off the victim, detained that suspect. We were there within a minute or two, took that person into custody. He's been charged with a variety of felony offenses, and actually, next week, we're doing a ceremony where we're actually recognizing those citizens for stepping up and detaining that person, so we can send that message that this kind of conduct is not acceptable.
Right. And I think what's really great is, and people forget they have this technology now, right? For whatever reason, they can just use that as one of the ways to reach out to police. And, I think there's some certain fear and trust. And I think maybe Officer Strobehn, you want to talk a little bit about that, because we've always talked about how with Asian American, Pacific Islander community in general, there's that, not even when it comes to bad things, even just good things, they don't reach out or talk about or reach out to police, just because of that trust, so talk about how things have things changed a little bit over the years, with younger generation. I don't know if it matters, but what are you seeing as from the local law enforcement perspective when it comes to that issue?
Well, I would say, as far as, we have a lot of organizations here in Las Vegas, and a lot of them that we've had that opportunity to build those relationships in the past few years in the Spring Valley Area Command, because we work with them along the Spring Mountain Corridor, and that's a lot of business owners, a lot of property owners. We have all those different community partners, and we've done a good job, like Sergeant Napier was saying, with our leadership here. Even though they may change, we've been able to build those relationships and have those lasting relationships. That way we can continue to build the trust and have that rapport. Because like you're saying, that was the biggest thing, as trying to, hey, if you're a victim of a crime, we need to help get that out. We know that they're occurring, but we want to know so that we can also follow it up with, where can we have officers along Spring Mountain? Where do we need to have these centralized? And so again, it's continue to educate, continue to do press conferences like this and interviews with you. And that way they understand that we are here to help. We are here to help catch whatever individual did that to them. And we just want them to look at us as a trusting partner. I know sometimes we have language barriers, but again, that's why we have officers who speak the language. That's why we have translators on a department. That way we get information translated into various different languages. That way we can continue to build that relationship, and that way that we have no barriers to help solve the problem.
And if I can just add on what Brad said there, we have several ambassadors, I guess you could say, in the Asian community who will reach out to us and they'll report crime on someone else's behalf, even if that person maybe doesn't want to come to us. That's happened literally this week, where someone's reporting crime on behalf of someone else, and we're taking proactive steps to touch base with that victim, even though they're the person actually contacting us. And I just like to make something clear is some of the historical barriers that perhaps might be perceived about some members of certain communities not reporting crime is immigration concerns. How prevalent that is here in Las Vegas, but let's face it, nationwide is an issue. It's not a secret. LVMPD is not an immigration enforcement agency. We will never ask anyone questions about their immigration status. And if you're a victim of a crime, you'll be treated as a victim of a crime and it'll be investigated. And if we can identify a suspect and make an arrest, you'll get the exact same treatment as anyone.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I kind of want to go into that a little bit. So you did mention immigration fears, and I think that's a good because people usually don't think about that, but there are people out there who are undocumented and maybe they just don't want to get themselves in trouble. So you want to stress to these people and to people that, hey, that's not what you're out to get them for, right? Especially when they're reporting a crime, for example.
Yep, absolutely. And without going into great details, I mean, there's actually provisions in our agency policy, even if there was, and it's in partnership with some other agencies, but even if someone was a victim of a serious crime, we actually have measures in place to make sure that there is no problems in any other agency relating to that, so that person can testify and make sure that offender goes through the justice system. LVMPD is not an immigration agency, and you will never be asked questions about your immigration status by an LVMPD officer.
All right. Well, that's definitely good to know and get the word out there. And as Officer Strobehn was saying earlier, some of the barriers out there for many communities, including the Asian American communities, the language barriers. And, with the organization like ACDC, I think they work with you guys in purpose in terms of providing that translation, and people with the agency, providing whatever they need in different languages. And I think that's great too. And in terms of seeing officers who represent the Asian American community, I know you have Asian American officer in the force. Officer Strobehn, what does that do to kind of help ease that fear and build that trust to have officers who look like you in the community as well?
I think when you first come off, and then say as soon as officers step out of a vehicle, whether we're all wearing the tan uniform or green uniform, whatever we may be wearing, I think there's an initial trust factor. And so whether or not we can place certain officers in certain areas to kind of help build that relationship, definitely an important factor. Is something that we continue to progress upon and improve, of course. And that's the nice thing about our community-oriented policing unit is we do a lot of different outreach events that all officers from the whole valley can get involved with.
No, that's great. And talk to us about just getting out there in the community for people to reach out to you. I mean, I think a lot of times it's information and lack of access. Maybe people do want to reach out to local law enforcement, especially people in the Asian American community. They don't know how to do that, especially in this day and age where we're affected by COVID. So Officer Strobehn, talk a little bit about ways for the community to reach out, whether they're an individual, homeowner, business owner, or there are different routes and access to reach out to Metro, and including people in your command.
Yeah, I can touch on that. And Sergeant Napier, I imagine, will be able to fill in some of the gaps. But again, we have our lvmpd.com, our website, and that will kind of break you into your geographical location of which area command you belong to. And from there, we have social media. The LVMPD is very active on social media. And again, as far as reporting crimes, we have our 311 in non-emergency, 911 emergency. And you can also file reports and crimes online, and you can just go through that on lvmpd.com. And again, it's a matter of just, again, pushing that out, that education, be like, hey, we do have that social footprint. And I know working with the different organizations, they're able to kind of help transpose that information across those different platforms.
Yeah.
And just to touch on just what Officer Strobehn just said there, is, I mean, we work on a community policing team at Spring Valley Area Command, but there's 10 area commands across LVMPD. So no matter where you live in Las Vegas, and I'm sure it's the same for Henderson and North Las Vegas, despite them being a separate jurisdiction, I mean, there's 10 other versions of Brad and I, and then a slew of officers on the team that just aren't here on the video today. And our job is to deal with and respond to long-term problems in a certain area. So if you go on lvmpd.com and punch in your address, it'll tell you what your local area command is. There's phone numbers directly to that area command, and also email addresses, which will come to the COP team, and you'll get a response from an officer, make a report. We'll handle whatever needs to be handled and go from there.
Yeah. And, when it comes to just representing the community, as you know, the Asian American community has been growing by leaps and bounds, over the last 10 years, especially in Las Vegas community. I'm sure that goes into the thinking and conversations of Metro as well, right? When it comes to thinking about all these different communities that are here now, and how can we reach out to them and have them feel like they can always reach out to you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things, I mean, the sheriff and the executive leadership of the department has a multicultural advisory committee where representatives from a variety of races and cultures are on a committee and bring issues to the sheriff's attention that are in their individual communities, and that trickles down from the top, down to us, the people on the ground who will actually resolve those problems. And that's sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And the fact that you're doing this conversation with us, I think it's a really good thing to at least put the face out there, right, in the community. You're there, that you're listening to our concerns and what we're going through. And it's been such a tough time. And as you know, if you're just joining us on the conversation now on Facebook, lots of things on social media right now, which is really concerning, especially for the Asian American community. All the violent incidents, discrimination. People have seen that here, even though maybe not at a level of some other cities. Thank goodness, here in the Las Vegas area. But we know that these kind of things can happen at any time. And one of the things that we want to touch on is this whole thing with, dealing with an active assailant, because we've seen that, in other places. So, I mean, either Sergeant Napier or Officer Strobehn, you may want to talk a little bit about that. People tuning in for this and just, they've seen that and they say, seeing the videos and pictures and say, this could happen to me, this can happen to my mother, my grandmother, my friend. How can you protect yourself and be as safe as possible if you do become a victim in that kind of situation?
It's a great question. So as far as active assailant, it's an individual or groups of individuals who are killing or actively killing groups of people, population, using any means necessary, whether it's firearms, knives, explosive devices, or anything such of that nature, up until they are stopped, preferably by a law enforcement continuing. And so we have the kind of modern saying, or run, hide, or fight. Thank you. Run, hide, fight. And so first thing, as soon as you may hear that shooting or you may hear those explosives, we want you to run. Find that nearest exit. Who are you with? Who's your partner? Right there. You can make it out of there in a safe manner. We don't want you to congregate, spread out. Okay. Also hiding, making that 911 emergency call.
Right.
You describe the individual. One of the main things is we want people to leave the lines open on 911. We don't want anyone to call and then hang up. We want to be able to hear what's going on. And then again comes that mindset where if you weren't able to flee that area, or you found a place that didn't have a good hiding spot, you do have to come to that mindset of find anything around you, whether it be a chair, a bat, a fire extinguisher, anything that may be in that office, to be able to fight back, because law enforcement is there and we are going to help, and we are going to get people in there as soon as we can. But as far as if we can exhaust those leads, then we are there to do what we can. And certainly, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, and it just reminds me of a conversation we had with Tiffany Gasson, who's the crime prevention specialist. And we talked about, safety for women and things like that. And I think we forget we have like apps and technology, right? We have in our place, like on our cell phone, to make noise or loud noise or something like that. Things that we can do to protect ourselves because it's happening probably in times that we least expect. And maybe we're by ourselves and we don't have anyone around us to help.
Yeah, I just say, because the question was raised about active assailant, obviously, there's nothing that should be mitigated or minimized, but obviously a true active assailant whose intent is to kill people for the sole purpose of killing people, obviously certainly it does happen. That's indisputable, but it is a fairly infrequent event, thank God. However, I mean, you're planning for a response to an active assailant shouldn't begin at the time you hear those first shots going off or something like that, whatever the incident is. You're planning for an active assailant event should begin now. You know,
Right.
like after the show, know where you work, where's your home. Start looking around when you enter a business. You don't need to be paranoid, but just try and be aware. You know, we all get stuck in our faces and our cell phones. We're checking out social media, whatever we're doing on there. But just simply when you go into a business, just do a quick kind of assessment. We all have the gut feeling of, you know, that doesn't look right. I don't like the feeling this guy's making me uneasy, etc. I see I've got an exit on the back there. It goes to the kitchen, etc. I see a fire extinguisher. If something crazy happens, I could pick up the fire extinguisher, spray someone with mist, use it as an impact tool. You know, I see a handle on that door. This is where I work every day. If I need to, I can take my belt off and I can tie that handle shut to stop someone from coming in this room. I mean, it's that pre-planning and situational awareness that should begin long before the actual incident occurs.
Yeah, and I think just with everything that's happened, I mean, it just reminds us that we do need to be aware of everything that's happening around us all the time, because you never know when something like this could happen. And I think it's just so disturbing when things like this could happen, you know, in the middle of the day around people, when you think that something like this won't happen, and it does. So any last word, anything you want to put out there? I know that, you know, you're trying to get out in the community again, but I've been seeing lots of stuff in your social media on Facebook, and I know you're trying to put information out there. What can people do to find resource in order to get help and maybe be in touch with the different people in your community policing team?
So certainly from a community policing perspective or an LVMPD perspective, it's just simply reach out. If we don't know about something, we can't do anything about it. You know, we do a lot of proactive things, but at the end of the day, if crime or suspicious activity needs to be reported to us so we can follow up on it. And that's really the biggest thing. We've all seen how seriously these recent events have been taken. There's an event taking place in very shortly where the governor's coming to our area to speak with some counterparts in response to it. So this whole issue is being taken very seriously by elected officials, the leadership of the LVMPD, and the men and women who are the boots on the grounds that are actually dealing with it. If someone reports a hate crime to us, I promise you it's going to get the attention of supervisors, and the officers are going to respond to it, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. So simply please just reach out to us and you will be treated as the victim that you should be, and we'll handle business.
And I think that's good to hear, because one of the concerns with people is like if they, you know, that it won't be taken seriously, you know, like, you know, especially when it comes to Asian Americans, they feel like it's hard to maybe down the road prosecute these things. So why should I, you know, or I don't want to get more in trouble or get people to come after me. How can you assure people that they can get out there and get the word out, especially when it comes to hate crime, that they will, as you said, be taken seriously, but also something will be done about it?
Well, I think it's very clear when you can see from the media, social media, and obviously the stance again of our leadership that hate crime is completely unacceptable and is going to get a very serious response. That's crystal clear. There's no dispute about that. One of the things, as we started earlier off, I don't want to encourage anyone to put themselves in a difficult situation, but if you're in a public space and start making for one of the term, a stink about the way you've been treated by someone, you're going to attract the other person's attention. Cell phones are going to come out. If it's on video is indisputable. It takes away the he said, she said, and obviously the police need evidence to act on a crime. One of the things I'd suggest to a lot of people is if you're unable to completely leave that situation, or you can retreat to a sort of safe distance where you're with other people, is get your cell phone out. And I'd never advocate anyone to have it out and start doing the thing where you start holding it in someone's face, because that can sometimes be inflammatory. But pull it out, open up the camera, hit the video app, hit record, and then just hold the phone down by your side like you're holding it in your hand. You're going to get all the audio on there, and it's not obvious to that person, and that person may not realize they're being video recorded, and the evidence is there for responding officers to act on.
No, that's good advice. And, you know, it's just good to hear these things. Like, you never really, you know, you see it all the time, and it's very disturbing now, but especially coming from local law enforcement, I think it's good to hear. Officer Strobehn, any last word that you want to say to people in your community that maybe you don't get to see right now, but what they can expect from you, especially this year, just coming off of a very tough year for a lot of people. And I think, you know, communication right now is key.
Yeah, thank you. The thing is we just want to be able to build that relationship. Again, that's why we were able to do these things and reach out to our community partners. And it only goes as far as the next person kind of reiterates the information. If we are able to, speak to you right now, and then you'll be able to put it out and you'll be able to talk to others about that and have their friends and to be able to talk to their family members. And it just kind of trickles down. And another thing, we have detectives that are also working on a presentation that kind of presents different facts and different scenarios, real life cases that have occurred here in America, in the country, about different crimes that have occurred. That way we can kind of learn from those and build upon them. And so that's something that will be rolling out in the future. And we'll be able to reach out to you and other organizations, and we'll have our detectives kind of go around and be able to talk on that. And so that's hopefully something that we'll be able to present to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, both to you, Officer Strobehn and Sergeant Napier with Las Vegas Metro Police Spring Valley Area Command, for taking the time to come speak with us today. I think, like you said, communication is key. Building relationships between the different communities, especially Asian American community during these tough times, is key as well. So I appreciate your time, all your advice and resources for the community, and we hope to continue to be working with you in the future.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode of EducAsian, and we will see you next week.